Let's get started. So, welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Here today, I have Danny. He's an old boss of mine. He's one of my first bosses as a developer, and it's really been a pleasure to get to know him and learn from him and grow from him. And he's actually become a friend of mine over the years. So I'm really happy to have him on. So, Danny, thanks so
Don, you're
much for
still
being
one of
here.
my you're still one of my favorite engineers to
Well,
this day.
I appreciate that. I know that's something every boss has to say, but I still love hearing it. I really
That's
appreciate that.
not nope. I'm saying that not out of any sort of responsibility. It's the truth.
Well, thank you, Danny. Thank you. Well, why don't you give a little bit of an intro into your background as a developer? Like, what do you do right now, and what have you done in the past?
Right now, I work for a company out of Chicago called Dialogue Tech. They do telephony analytics, which for those of you still awake, is actually a pretty cool bit of technology that it's kind of like Google Analytics for telephones. It's usually like this black box within an organization is what happens on the telephone. Like what's going on with these conversations that people are having. So our software kind of sits within someone's telephone system and provides metrics into their phone calls. So we can process their voice into text, and then we can apply machine learning and artificial intelligence on top of those transcriptions, and then provide all sorts of useful information back to the enterprise customer. So like super basic example, if you were Terminix and you're a pest control company, you have all these phone calls coming in from all these different call centers throughout the country. You have no idea like what's going on, what's happening on these phone calls. So with our software, you can see like, oh, everyone who's calling from South California is saying the phrase bed bugs over and over again. So it's a really easy key to that company to be like, oh, we need to shift marketing for bed bugs over to Southern California. So that's just one super basic example. Auto manufacturers love our service for getting metrics about like what types of issues people are having with their cars. For example, BMW could know that like 70% of their calls in Illinois have to do with like transmission. So my role within that company is to modernize and engineer the user interface. So we've been doing a lot of stuff with component libraries, React, GraphQL, just to name a few. Before Dialogue Tech, I bounced around within the software engineering front end development um, industry, just doing all sorts of things from working in design firms to working in the board of trade, doing on the trading floors, working on brokerage software, all the way back to my days working in Charlotte for Wells Fargo National Bank as a cubicle engineer for a monolithic company. So kind of had the cool thing I like about like this industry is you get to experience all different types of businesses, but your job, you can kind of be an engineer and do the thing that you love to do, but float through these industries and get exposed to all different kinds of, of things. So that's one thing I really liked about it.
Yeah, you're someone that very quickly and you very quickly get into a situation, a new position, and you're super eager to learn. You soak up everything like a sponge. I think that's one of the shining traits about you is you really are just like you're just positive all the time. You like even on your down days, you kind of just bring this positive, constructive attitude that everyone loves, and you've probably done it throughout your whole development career.
Oh, thanks. That's actually one thing I really appreciated about you coming in to Analyte was your attitude. Like attitude can go such a long ways. Even if you are a new developer and you're coming into technologies that you don't quite fully have a great understanding of, if you have a positive attitude and confront challenges with optimism, and just being open to learning, and an attitude can go a long ways. It's absolutely very important.
Yeah, it's great to hear that. I feel like the more people I talk with, the more they really care about. They say different things for it, but attitude, personality, eagerness to learn, and what's funny is like a lot of other hiring managers, they like it feels like they're looking for a good cultural fit. They're looking for a good personality to come onto the team, especially like junior, right? Because you can really you can teach them, you can help them. There are code reviews. There's a process at the company that helps ramp them up. Oh, so before I forget, you're going back to Analyte. What was kind of like your role in the hiring process? Because I believe, actually, I'll kind of just let you describe it.
Yeah, I was on a pretty small front end engineering team, so my role in the hiring process was to initially just screen folks over the phone, um, to see what their sort of depth of knowledge was before we scheduled the in-person interviews. And then when we opted to bring them in, I would sit down with them either one-on-one or with someone else from the front end team, and we would just ask questions about their lives and just about like what sorts of experiences they've had with you know whatever language they're working in.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you were one of the first people I talked to through that interview process. Um, I remember us talking a bit about React because you guys were kind of picking up. I think you we had a React component in the order process, and you wanted to be able to manage that, maintain that, potentially utilize React a little bit more in the code base. I remember, I think as technical as the interview got, we really just had like a tech talk, kind of like, and we dove into what fascinated us about development and React. Was there a normal? Because I remember other applicants kind of had to go through a like a practice project. I think you guys would hand out. Fortunately, I was able to. We were kind of just able to have a fun conversation. Do you feel like the live streams gave exposure into like my coding? I'm kind of curious, like what, like how I kind of passed that portion up of the interview.
Yeah, your live streams were pretty key because not only did that give us place as a starting point to learn about you and your skills, but it also clued us into your passion into the industry and the technologies that you are learning about, and that attitude of reaching out to others to educate them is super telling to a young engineer. So that went a really long ways, especially once we started talking about you in comparison to some of the other folks we were interviewing. That was just one of the key sticking points that everyone kept coming back to is like, oh, he's doing all this outreach and he's doing all this education, and he seems super interested in like bettering himself and others, and that's super key in this industry, I think.
Okay, interesting. So really the key was the outreach that kind of gave you a little bit of exposure into the type of person I am, I guess. Well, so a lot of people are kind of nervous with live streams, and I kind of I push it. Like I try to get people to live stream and just expose themselves a little bit more because a lot of people are really great people. They're nervous and they go through these closed channels of doing cold applications, and they have some of them have very dry portfolios that doesn't show any of their personality. There's nothing on social media about them, so they're really going in blind, and the employers bring in someone in blind, and that process of getting to know the person, it's going to take a lot longer. So for people that are a little bit shy for live streams, do you have any advice or recommendations on other things that they can do to kind of expose themselves a little bit and be a positive influence in the community to a point where that's going to be very attractive to an employer.
Yeah, I think even if you're not doing something live, you can play with video pre-recorded, do some audio podcasts even. One thing that's super important is to like find ways to differentiate yourself. Like most people have a GitHub account, maybe they have like commits associated with their name. Like we can go into their LinkedIn and we can see, a couple photos here and there, but it's very two-dimensional. Like if you can kind of open up that third dimension of seeing like having audio, having like stuff you've done to contribute to the larger community, that's going to give us more optics, like and more differentiation than just seeing like commits in a GitHub profile or like a resume or because it unlocks that personality, and that's one of the things that we're really like looking for, early on.
That makes sense. So how would someone give that information to you? Do they kind of mention it in a cover letter? Because I remember I would put my live stream in the cover letter. I'm not sure if that was really a good place for it. I just had to put it somewhere. My resume was full. How do people kind of deliver that information to you? Do they do it through the application process, or do they do it in the first interview? What would you suggest?
I would say cover letters are extremely important. You should always write a personalized cover letter to the company that you're submitting your resume to. I've gotten more than one job that way, and like the person at that company even said like, what really stood out was your cover letter. It was like personal to our company, and you're talking about our technologies. You really took the time to understand what our company was all about, and you added all this context to your resume. So like, I know it's time consuming, but if you
Yeah.
just sit down and you know, carve out those cover letters, like even if a paragraph or two you can kind of reuse between cover letters to say like this is who I am, and these are things I've done online and stuff, but like always try to carve out that like paragraph or two that's customized like to that company to really speak to them. And then yeah, you can open up and like add like links about hey, here's some Twitch streams I've done, and here's some personal pet projects. Like those are, yeah, it's always really good to see those up front.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that because I think a lot of people. Um, I know it's been a while for you, but a lot of people going through the application process, they're tired. They're tired of all the rejection and they get discouraged easily. So there's a lot of conversation around that, but it's hard to see the results of the effectiveness of a cover letter. So I notice a lot of people, they're just like, well, screw the cover letter. If I'm not going to get an email back, I've gotten rejected, 50 to 100 times, I'm not going to include it. It's a shame because it is so powerful for a junior position. How are you going to stand out? How are you going to show that you are a good fit and you can provide value and you care about, you did a little research, so you're actually, you are trying to find a good fit. So
Yeah,
it's discouraging
yeah,
to see that.
yeah. It's really hard to get that first job or two straight out of a boot camp or college, like you know, because you don't have that sort of bulleted list under your experience. So looking for things that aren't career experience that you can add as like, experience is like, well, I started up this podcast that talks about programming topics as an experience. It's not, it was my own thing, but it shows initiative and self drive and that kind of thing. And also just following up like directly, if you can get an email or phone number of someone within the company that you can continue to follow up with, like showing that initiative after you've sent in your resume can go a long ways, or at least give you some insight into like where your resume is in their process. Maybe they haven't had a chance to look at it, or they're setting up phone calls, that kind of, and maybe you can get the ball rolling there as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good advice. It's something I even forget to do at times. So, what were a few common things you noticed among applicants that kind of like initially stood out that made you realize they weren't going to be a good fit? What are some common habits that developers can kind of watch out for when they go into an interview process and really hone in and try to improve with themselves?
Um, it's pretty easy to tell if someone has a lot of nerves going into an interview, and I feel like um, a way to diffuse that up front, if you want, is just to sort of even admit it, like right up front, coming in. It's like, wow, I'm actually really nervous right now, and a lot of times, sort of showing your vulnerability to someone early can sort of personalize you with them, and like it's can kick off a conversation, even to be like, oh yeah, I know the situation you're in. Like I was nervous in these things as well, and like we're not. And they can also sort of set expectations of like, we're not gonna rake you over the coals here. Like it's easy to remember that well, it's important to remember, I would say, that like, you know it's just a conversation you're having with someone. um Trying to let them get to know you, but also pretty key is that you're trying to get to know them and to decide like if they are a good fit for you. So always keep that in mind too, that you're interviewing them as well. But to get back
Yeah.
to your original question, one thing that is a huge turnoff in an interview is just the sort of like the no enthusiasm thing. It can kill an interview so quickly. Like even if you are very skilled, um, I've done several interviews where we're talking afterwards, and people are saying like, oh, he just didn't seem really interested to be there. Like he seemed like, or she seemed like she was like put out to be there. Like she just didn't seem excited, or he didn't seem like um, to have much enthusiasm. So just having an energy and an enthusiasm can go such a long way. It all comes back to attitude. I've said that, we've talked about that already, but attitude and enthusiasm are so important.
So it's really enthusiasm to be there. It's not necessarily enthusiasm for coding. It's more of just like this. You're getting a feel for who they are at that point in the interview. So it's just enthusiasm in general. Bring that energy and enthusiasm into an interview. Um,
Yeah, I think it's both. It's a like I'm stoked to be here and have this opportunity to work here. But also showing that energy towards like the things that you're learning or the skills that you've been developing, and that eagerness to learn more about the things, like because things are always going to come up in the interview where it's like, oh, do you know about XYZ technology? And you're gonna have a choice to make. You can either say, I have no idea what XYZ is, but I'd like to learn, or you try to BS your way through an answer that try to let them know that you know what it is. I think it's always better to say, I've never had to use it. I know of it. I'm eager to learn more about it. Uh, that goes a long ways. One thing that I would advise against is trying to BS answer about something that you're uncomfortable with. It's easier to say, I want to learn more about this. I don't know it yet, and that's a fair answer most of the time.
yeah, that's really good advice. People are so nervous about being right. Like I I don't know how you feel about this, but I see a lot of people preparing for the interview instead of just like getting excited about having a conversation and learning more about the industry. And like I meet people that are really nervous. A lot of people are really nervous and they're going to go into an interview. What do I do for this interview? How do I act? And I almost feel like any advice with that sort of thing, first of all, you don't know what the interview is going to be like. Every company does it different. Every interviewer is very different. So at least for me, what helped, and this is my recommendation for people, is just keep coding, have fun. If you had planned on working on your project that night, keep working on it. Like just keep moving forward, and then get a good night's sleep, good breakfast, go to the interview, and just like some people will meditate, some people work out. I worked out before an interview. That kind of calmed my nerves. It just drained me. So I only had so much enthusiasm, but I wasn't nervous, and I could just have fun with the interview. Well, I wasn't that nervous. But what for people that are really for people that are really nervous going into an interview, that they just want to have the perfect interview. They want to get it right. They want to get this job, and that's kind of building that anxiety. What's your advice for people like that? Like, what can they do to go into the interview with the correct mindset?
Uh, I would say probably three things. I'd say one, don't forget to breathe going into it.
Yeah.
I've done this like, I get super nervous, like, and I'm talking through something that I'm excited about, and I realize like while I'm talking that like A, I'm talking really fast, and B, I'm like out of breath because like I've gotten like so nervous and bundled into this thing that like, I can't even breathe. So like try to stay relaxed and breathe. Two, I would, you know, a lot of it's just body language. So even if you just put yourself in a relaxed um, body language, like it can help trick your brain into calming down a little bit. So like, you know, lean back a little, cross your legs, get comfortable, like let them see that you're comfortable to be there, that you're not all, bundled into a little fetal position in your chair there. And I'd say the third thing, kind of practical advice is, and one thing I always like to do is try to like, think of someone that you admire who has poise and confidence or otherwise kind of owns these sorts of situations. Like just think about like maybe what they would do, and if it helps to like emulate them a little bit, to help calm your nerves, like that can help too.
I like that idea. Thinking about like even, almost everyone has a mentor, and usually your mentors are people. For me, like a mentor would be kind of a better version of myself. They're doing things that I want to do, and that I admire in them. So I feel like if you did that and you thought about emulating them, it almost kind of like it gets you out of your head. It distances you from all the anxious thoughts you're feeling, and you're really focused on emulating. You're focused on what they would do. It almost like breaks your thought pattern to that's probably this wheel that's been going round and round as you like drove to the interview. I like that emulation.
Yeah, I can kind of, if anything, just let a little air out of that anxiety balloon that's easy to to fill. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
to break you out of a cycle. Like it's easy to get in your head, like you said, and just get super clammy and clammed up. And then you know, you start being your own worst enemy at that point, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so so there are kind of three paths to becoming a developer, three common paths that people kind of say. So a CS degree, boot camp, and self-taught. Those are kind of the three that people toss up into the air, and some people feel like certain paths are better than others. Some people feel like hiring managers care about one over the other. So I kind of want to get your opinion. What are your thoughts between the three? Like, do you have any assumptions when someone comes in with a certain like a CS degree versus like a boot camp, because they do provide different education. It's a different experience. So I kind of just want to hear your thoughts between the three for developers that come in and apply.
Yeah, I don't tend to look too hard at like formal education. Um, I very much more interested to learn about like what have they done on their own time. Like, have they built any projects on their own? Um, what types of skills have they picked up? Do they have like any work experience yet? Um, because I think more important than the uh, the degree is just the ability to do the work and that knowledge into the skills that we need, and like sort of that attitude that sort of self-driven, eager to learn attitude. I would take someone out of like a self-taught situation, um, with a great attitude, eager to learn, who has a couple of things that they've built on their own, or have done things in the community, uh, over someone with, a BS in computer science with, uh, an okay attitude and like, and maybe a job or two. Like I would go for the former for sure.
That's I think a lot of people are going to appreciate hearing that. Um, do you remember? I got that feeling from you too. First of all, like it was kind of irrelevant. We didn't talk about formal education at all. I don't think in the interview process. I think that's very refreshing to hear. And what's interesting, you remember Scott? I remember he when I had that interview with him, he was like cautious because I came from a boot camp. He's had some bad experiences from people came from a boot camp, and so that was like the first exposure of, well, maybe some hiring managers do have um, this feeling about certain educational pathways and stuff like that. So I first of all, I'm lucky that I got you as a kind of a first manager because you looked right past that. But I feel like, and from what I hear from other people, most people feel that way. They don't really care about the education. It's what you can do, what you can contribute, and who you are as a person, and like how that's going to integrate into the team. That's so it's
Yeah.
refreshing to hear that from you.
Yeah. Well, I think one great thing about the boot camps, like I don't know, can't speak for all of them. I know there's lots of them, but they help you really focus down on a specific set of skills, that are perhaps in like a really high demand, and they can sort of teach you the fundamentals on that particular set of skills. If it's JavaScript, or even if it's more focused, like if it's React within JavaScript, they help you focus down on the fundamentals and like actually, learning that particular technology from the ground up in a very like, focused way. I think there's a lot of virtues to that, whereas college educated, folks are often being exposed to all different types of, classes that are, some are relevant to being a programmer, some are totally not. Like I remember, when I was getting my degree, like I had a COBOL class, which,
Oh no.
had no bearing whatsoever on being a front end developer, except like it sort of exposed you to like, the fundamentals of a programming language. But, I didn't. There were no, of course, this was like the '90s, but there wasn't even a JavaScript class in my college degree. I'm a computer science major, but, you know, and a front end developer, but I took no front end programming courses in college. So, but that's what I like about boot camps is, they take fresh minds and can sculpt that technology like, from the ground up, like very focused.
Yeah, yeah, they definitely do. And you had mentioned there are all sorts of boot camps out there. I think, and it's unfortunate, but really about 98 to 99% are, in my opinion, they're going to get you halfway. You have to be careful about what you invest your money in. There are really good boot camps, but um, I think I think where boot camps start to shine are boot camps that, first of all, like, and this is kind of just my piece of advice, they have a really strict interview process. Um, they have the amount of time that it's going to take to learn a language. Like, they've accounted for that, because I see boot camps that will, in 3 months, you're going to learn 5 different languages and you're going to build all these different apps, and or not 3 months, like a month and a half. And it scares me when I see that. I'm like, they're spread too thin. There's no way that they're going to be able to remember all of what they learned and apply it. So boot camps are tricky. They really are. But if you get a good boot camp, I I think you're going to be in really good shape. So we kind of talked about the interview process, it was honestly great hearing like your perspective because I never really dove deep into this with you. So it's really good hearing your perspective on how you see new candidates coming in and kind of what you look for. And I think people are really going to appreciate that. But let's dive into like what is a junior developer, a new developer? What do they bring to the table? Like what are some positive things that they can bring onto a team when you bring them on? What are you excited about when you bring someone on?
Uh, you know, I think one of the virtues there is just that they're coming in kind of with a clean slate. Um, you know, engineers that have been at it for a while who, are 10, 20 years in, they may come in with a lot of sort of baggage or bad habits or, you know, terrible experiences with previous companies or teams. So they may have like bit of an attitude problem, like. So I feel like there's a lot to be said for someone who's coming in fresh, eager to get going. A lot of boot camp students and college kids as well are, typically instructed on, like I said, the those underlying programming fundamentals. Whereas I think a lot of older developers maybe have been like sort of hacking and slashing for many years to get like into that sort of niche.
What do you
So
mean
like
hacking and slashing?
well, like a lot of web developers who are like 30, 40, 50 years old, grew up learning a lot of this on their own, like just by virtue of these technologies being like so new at the time. When I started JavaScript, it was just such this squirrely little dumb language that had no real purpose to it. Like people were using it to put like the little scrolling messages in the browser, and like it was such a
Yeah, I
hacky
remember
little
those.
undisciplined language. But now it's like formalized, and there's testing frameworks, and it's like, oh, it's all very very nice. But yeah, it I think a lot of folks who are coming in out of college and boot camp have the virtues of being able to sort of look at this programming language as sort of this new formalized specification, who don't have all the bad habits and baggage that perhaps come with an older engineer.
Yeah. Do you do you feel like so when you have kind of a an older engineer that comes in and onto the team, do you feel like there's a way to get them to open up again? Do you feel like there's a way to get them to be open to learning, eager to learning, be a little bit more humble? Or do you feel like a lot of people are very set in their ways?
I don't think that people get too much. Hasn't been my experience that people are getting like too much set in their ways. It's
Okay.
just older engineers, like especially someone who's coming into a new company, they're they either just got out of a bad company that they left on intentionally, of their own like volition, or they were let go for some reason. Like they're going to be coming in with some sort of um, some sort of bad experience, or unless they are just happy to, they ended this job on perfect terms and they were just ready for something
Mm-hmm.
new, and they're on to our company. So um, it's just it's just people at the end of the day. So it's all about like um, building relationships and rapport within your team. We haven't really talked about that, but I think that's kind of important, is just to like um, you know, like just get to know folks in your team, and like build that friendship slash rapport. Like it just makes the work days a lot more fun when you get
Yeah.
along with everyone in your team, and um, it makes the good times all the better. It makes the hard times a little bit easier to bear. Like me and my 3 4 colleagues just the other night were playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare, like after work. It was just a really nice way to sort of unwind as a team, after putting in a couple hours over the weekend. So um, that's when it can be a lot of fun, for sure.
Yeah, I really like that. So I think a lot of people coming into a new position are really nervous too, and so that's such great advice to really open up to your team and get to know them. That because that shaped my first job. Like that was my introduction into the industry, and that's why I really appreciate you and Analyte so much. Is because that could have been a really bad experience. I've heard bad experiences for junior developers.
Yeah,
So
but the people there
it
were pretty unique. It was such a great group. It really was.
they were really unique. I kept seeking that out again. Kept seeking that out again. I didn't quite find the perfect fit, but I definitely found some really good companies. But for people that are coming in, that are kind of nervous, that kind of know that they should get to know the team, but don't really know how to initiate that, don't really know what to say, who to talk to really make their life a lot easier at the company. Do you have any advice for people like that?
Yeah, I would just say like stay open to just new little conversations and connections. Like you can start super small with that. Like most companies are in something like Slack now, where like everyone's sort of in chat rooms about various topics, and there's often like one or two kind of off-topic rooms where like people are discussing non-work things. Um, and just I think looking for opportunities to get involved in a conversation or two about those off-topic things is super helpful. And like eventually you'll just find like a comrade or two that you share like common interests with. Next thing you know, that like you're like kind of talking one-on-one and sharing jokes and stuff like that. So I think those connections can just happen organically if you are open to them, and just stay involved with conversations as they come up. Yeah, it'll just happen for you over time. I think as you get into the new team, I feel like there's definitely always that period of like a a month or so at a new company where at least for me I rarely say much of anything in the
Yeah.
chats. Like I'm pretty quiet, I'm lurking, I'm kind of like feeling everyone out and learning like everyone's personality types. Then you can start like throwing in a joke or two, or like sharing like a link you found online that you thought was cool. And um, for instance, yesterday someone shared like the rocket launch that was going on in one of the chat rooms. That kind of like clued me in right there to like who the space nerds were. So like it's a good opportunity to start chatting about other little topics around that in that realm. It was fun. But there was usually there's like a TV movies chat, or just get involved in those like little channels at whatever company you end up with. And if you can connect on movies and TV shows and video games and stuff like that, you're gonna make buddies in your workplace in no time.
Yeah, I 100% agree. The problem with me is I don't remember movie titles, so I can't connect. It's terrible. It's actually really frustrating. And people talk about actors, actresses. I don't know any of them. I just don't
What
know.
was
My
that
brain
movie
will.
with the guy and he did the thing? Yeah, sort of the tall,
Uh,
short guy.
right, and you hear that the seventh time from me, and like people are just shaking their heads. So I connect through games, right? That's my thing. And
Yeah,
I think that's a really cool thing that you play Call of Duty. I mean, like we started doing that when I was at Analyte, and that was a lot of fun. And then we continued it, right? Um,
exactly. Yeah.
but it's almost nice to get that exposure of what it's like to work with people. And that's what I found is you can work with people, you can have a really good work relationship, and then not talk with them outside of work. And that's fine. You don't have to be friends. You got to work together. You got to get along. You have to enjoy working with the people that you work with. But when you do connect with them through a movie, that's not me, but through a video game, which is me, um, it like it just like they're more open to conversation. They're more open to feedback. You're more open to feedback from them, and you're more willing to help each other out. Like it just creates that personal connection that just strengthens your work relationship. That's one thing I like about like game nights and things like that, because Catalytic would host that game night. I unfortunately was too busy to participate in one of those things, but I love them. I love when companies host something like that. It's such an
Yeah.
icebreaker.
Yeah, and I will say that like you may meet someone at your company who either doesn't seem to like be very easy to work with, or seems like they just don't like you for some reason, and that's fine. Like, um, but either you can chalk it up as like this person's kind of a known quantity for whatever reason, or you may stumble upon something that they are interested in that you are also interested in, that you can start like pinging them random questions about. And one thing about difficult people is like if you can find what they're into and sort of become like more, kind of bridge that gap with them, uh, it can make your life a lot easier. Hopefully, you don't come up across a whole lot of difficult people, but it's going to happen, I'm sure, in your journeys.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's good advice. So we talked about some of the positives juniors bring. What about some of the qualities that juniors bring that might be challenging to the team, even kind of bring it into the new code base? What do you what are some of those challenges that you see juniors kind of bring in that you got to work through with them?
I think there's a lot of stuff like in this profession, a lot of tricks and solutions that come with like just sort of quote unquote doing the work, that are it's really hard to pick up in a boot camp or something like that. There's lots of tools and software to learn the ins and outs of. Like there's learning the quirks around your editor and integrating the code base. That's hard unless you start just kind of doing that over and over again at different companies and different code bases. There are lots of sort of best practices you need to get up to speed on that you may not necessarily be keyed into coming out of education. Um, and then there's all the sort of like simple facts like, oh, this is maybe this person's first office environment experience. So that kind of comes with a whole host of challenges too. Um, but I think at the end of the day, as long as that sort of that, quote unquote, sort of junior level new person coming in has that desire to learn and that desire to communicate, and show enthusiasm and be enthusiastic and sort of take challenges and setbacks with optimism is just so important. I keep coming back to attitude, but it's
It's
even if you run
important.
into something at work where like, oh, my inexperience got me into this coding issue, and I broke something, whatever that may be, like, um, to not like get doom and gloom, just kind of keep optimistic and roll with the punches and try to figure out like how to avoid that thing in the future. Such a good attitude to have. So I feel like any those drawbacks that come with bringing in a sort of a junior engineer can be sort of easily mitigated with the right attitude and the right conversation, the right uh, you know the desire to communicate.
Yeah, yeah, and so I think a lot of people hear about attitude. How how did you develop such a positive attitude? Were you always like this, or did you really have to kind of like strive for it, and you had to build up certain habits for it? How did you become you?
It was just a road paved with just terrible attitude for 2 decades. I'm kidding. I don't know. Like I've dealt with difficult folks, and it's always like sort of hard to talk to them about work topics, or they just like you know having someone who's difficult can make your day so much worse. And I've never wanted to make anyone's day worse just because they have to work with me. So like and I think it's just looking for ways to make your colleagues' lives better, uh, by having you around is, I think, such a key thing. Um, you know, just having that willingness to fill in knowledge gaps you may have, or just be helpful. Like if you have information that someone is looking for, to provide that to them, or like you know um, keep an eye out for tooling that makes someone's job easier, um, stuff like that. But I don't. I'm the first to say about myself that I'm sort of like on this journey also as an engineer. And I'm always trying to like uh, you know be a good. I just want to be a helpful, good employee, and help people on my team. And I just think that being a good team player is just an important thing in general. I don't have a good answer about like how why I am me. I just I guess
I go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I think you kind of gave the answer without realizing it, and it's really, it's almost like doing the action without expecting the reward right away. So it's really about being a person, and we talked about emulating, even if this isn't you at first, pretending, because I do think in the end it's going to serve you and serve the people around you, but being a person that does look out for others, that's going to show, that's going to shine. Like you said, you shared tooling, you've always come off as a person that has been helpful. You've never wanted to put anyone down. You've always wanted to build other people up. And I think you almost have to be that person for a while until it really sticks in, because you are going to see, I think, just as people, we need to kind of feel rewarded to really strengthen habits. And when you do that, you help others and you build other people up. It feels good, right? You feel good about it. You make other people feel good, and it just makes your work relationship a lot better with them. And overall, it's good for both of you. And eventually, you'll see that, you'll feel that, and it'll just become natural. Um, but I think you really did give the answer of, you just you have to do things for others, and that's where that positivity and your perspective starts shifting.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah, that's a great answer, Don. I would add too that like for me personally, I've been working remotely for over 10 years now, and I really love like the remote work. Working from home has a whole lot of like advantages. I do miss the office environment sometimes, and like being face to face with friends and stuff is really, and colleagues, is nice. Um, but working from home is great, and I would say that like one thing that I've always said to myself is, if I want to be an effective offsite employee, I really need to just go that extra mile with being communicative and helpful, um, and just putting that emphasis on making myself as in the office as possible, even though I'm not there. Because from my thinking is that like they could find someone local to do the same like type of work. So it's kind of on me to make it worth it for them to have someone like me like offsite.
That makes sense. That definitely makes sense. You do have to you do have to build up a lot of skills being remote. You were my first remote boss. That's the first time I've ever, like, I didn't meet you until the end, right? Until like we both kind of moved on, and that was a crazy feeling, because you were one of my best bosses. I've worked in other offices before, and it blew me away. I'm like, oh, I don't know how this is gonna go. And being that far away, this is odd. This is weird. But it ended up being really good. So it actually gave me confidence that you could work remote. Like, this is a real thing, and you could be effective at a company. You can build a company up, and it's just like all about, like you said, building up your communication skills. That's and your presence. And there's a way you could feel present at the company and still be remote. And it's about how you talk with people and engage. And so it's just it's kind of like a eye opening for me. But
Nice. Yeah, I think too.
I
Like I would just say, like ultimately too, at the end of the day, we have to work a lot. It's just part of our culture. We have to work to build, to earn money, to do things, obviously to eat and things. It's important. But like, it's good to end the day just being able to say to yourself that like I'm, a helpful person on the team. Like you want to go to bed feeling good that you're making everyone's lives a little easier, and you're doing a good job. Um, and that's always, I think that's always nice. Like to have a clear conscience at the end of the day that you're you know trying to make lives a little easier.
yeah, yeah, I think so. Well, okay, so I have one last question for you. Uh, I think I think a lot of junior developers that are currently in a position, they're they're I think most people are striving to become better. They're striving to just get further in their career and become a more efficient and helpful developer. There a lot of people do. They are trying to soak up information. They're trying to grow, uh, and I think a lot of people feel like they don't really know when they've transitioned in kind of past that junior role, right? So they don't feel like they know. Well, first of all, like sometimes even what to strive for, right? So even just setting goals for yourself. I guess what I'm asking is, how does someone transition from being a junior developer to a mid-level developer? What goals should they set for themselves? But like really, the important part of this question is, what are the differences you see between a mid-level developer and a junior developer?
Yeah, I think I feel like uh, I consider sort of more junior level developers to be kind of a little bit more like kind of tactical, uh, like um, sort of boots on the ground, for lack of a better phrase, like engineer who um, can work on targeted things, who may need some guidance and handholding through code review or maybe more pair programming stuff like that, but um, can't operate completely independently. Needs quite a bit of assistance, things like that. I think like transitioning out of that role means that you are, getting more involved in meetings. You've kind of gained the respect and trust of your peers, so you're making decisions that they agree with, and like you're changing the sort of trajectory of projects and work that's in flight based on those. So you're more involved in like those product level discussions because they say, hey, Don has had some really good ideas with this user experience thing for XYZ. Like maybe let's have him in this meeting. So that kind of trust that people have in your abilities to execute as an engineer and operate independently and start making decisions that are a little bit more high level, that are impacting things outside of your direct role. I think that's when you start to really transition out of that junior level role.
Okay, so and this is something you always encourage me with, is to speak up with meetings, because I remember I would have ideas, but I felt like I was too new. I was shy about getting them out there. So you feel like a big portion of it is really just kind of growing and learning. But when you do pick up good habits and you start getting confidence in being able to give suggestions that will impact the product in a positive way, and people are listening, they'll gain respect for you. But really, like, the action to take is, if you have a suggestion, kind of speak up in meetings, like let your voice be heard a little bit, uh, and let other people hear you. So even if you're wrong, even if people are disagreeing with you, I think even just the act of speaking up It's just going to you're eventually going to say something right. You're eventually going to say something that has like a really positive impact, and people are going to remember that, and they gain respect for you for that. So, do you feel like to really kind of like fix like if someone is kind of stuck in a where they feel in a junior role, do you feel like the course of action is to speak up in meetings? Is it to make suggestions? What would be the
Yeah, I'm
course
actually
of
glad
action?
I'm really glad you brought that up because that's actually one of the hardest things to find your voice, like in meetings at a new company. And by the way, I think your instinct to kind of maybe float in in the shadows, so to speak, at first is probably a really good one. Like you don't want to like be fresh into a new job and like be throwing ideas all over the place. It's good to kind of like learn like the sort of the vibe of the company and the ins and outs of the team and like this and that before you start stepping in, of course. But yes, like it's actually really hard. It's one of the hardest things is to like sort of you know just be able to speak up like in meetings. It is very intimidating. Like there's a lot of people in the room, like a lot of people have been in that profession or for years and years, and like there's multiple people in there in different jobs. So like, it's kind of like this, who am I to have this idea? Um, and side note, I will say that like, um, you know, the imposter syndrome is a very real thing within the engineering community. So like, be mindful of that. Like, it's normal to think even 10 years in that like, what am I? One of these days they're going to discover that I'm a terrible developer. Like, that's a normal thing. Try not to freak out about that. It's okay. But yes, I would say learning to trust your instinct when someone says something you don't agree with, like that is a very key thing, to be able to start to hear that voice inside your head to say, I don't agree with this. This is wrong for XYZ reasons. And like starting to speak up and offering an opposing viewpoint because, uh, by the way, you might have like that bit of info um, in the room that no one else has, that you've been exposed to this problem before. You've seen this detail play out. Like you have that unique voice, and that's part of the reason why you're in that team. So um, do consider that. Like consider um, trying to be more vocal if you feel like maybe you are the quiet one in the room.
And I think that isn't just advice you're dishing out. That's advice that you practice. I remember feeling very shy. I also remember feeling I remember disagreeing with people, but I didn't speak up. But I remember talking to you about it. You're really easy to talk to about things like this. But I think the one thing that you encouraged, like I was at a point, it was like a month or two in, and you're just like, speak up. Like people want to hear what you have to say. But you gave me this piece of advice that I took with me for the rest of my development positions, and it allowed me to speak up. But you basically said if you don't speak up, if you really disagree with something, um, it's gonna fester. Like it kind of sits with you, and people have a hard time of letting things like that go when they're not just getting it out there. People can disagree with you, but just to get your voice out there and just express yourself and show your concern for a certain uh, implementation or strategy or whatever you're concerned about. Like, I really took that with me, and ever since then, I really did speak up. I was vocal about things, and one thing, like your piece of advice, helped me gain that respect more quickly with my colleagues, and that was, I like that's just me telling you that that's really good advice. I know you still mentor a lot of developers coming in, but that's advice that really changed the trajectory of my career and the respect that I earn from my peers. So, um, it's I think that was really good advice. I just want to tell you that.
That's great to hear. Thanks. And P.S. You always had great ideas. Like we undersell our value and our own knowledge and what we bring to the table. So yeah, it's getting out of that habit. Super key.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, Danny, I know you kind of have to get back to things. I really appreciate you coming onto this podcast. We covered a lot more topics than I thought we were going to. You're just, right to the point with really good advice, and you don't even have to think about it. This is just natural to you. So thank you
Great.
so
Well,
much for thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate you being on here and joining me. So if if you had to kind of give like one final piece of advice for junior developers or aspiring developers that are kind of struggling to get that first position, what would it be?
I you know, I I'd say to be patient, be vigilant. Don't settle for the first thing that comes along either. Like, I mean, obviously, if you're going through some financial hardships, and you need to find work, obviously, and you need to take something right away. That's totally cool. But I say, respect your life. And try to find an employer that respects a proper work and life balance. Like, this is very important. Like, if your employer is expecting you to work evenings and weekends and tries to cultivate a culture and normalcy around those types of hours, like, be really careful about that. You can find yourself in a job that can burn you out rather quickly. So try to find good people who respect your life outside of work. Um, it's very important. Yeah, and I would just say, you know, don't get discouraged or disheartened. Just keep at it. Like, the road to success is paved with rejections and heartache. So just got to keep going and reaching out and making connections and making friends and being involved with podcasts like Don's here, and staying active, and you'll find that dream job.
That's excellent advice. Thank you so much, Danny. Again, I appreciate you coming on, and I'm sure we'll talk soon. But yeah, thanks so much. It was great talking with you.
Thanks for having me. Let's do some Call of Duty here soon.
That sounds good. That sounds really good. All right, have a good rest of your day and take care of yourself. See you later, Danny.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks.